Okay, so we'll get started then. So good morning, everyone. Hope you can all hear me okay. Welcome to the Leading Remote Teams webinar. My name is Dave Tomkinson, obviously from the AND Partnership. For those of you that don't know who we are, we're an organisation development consultancy focusing on helping organisations to align behaviours really with operational goals. So anything involving behaviour change is really what we do. We're delighted that we work with some great clients, full list obviously on the website. But really in terms of why we're doing these, we wanted to try and help organisations during these times, which I think it's fair to say are unprecedented. So we're putting on a lot of free webinars to really just help people get some tips and techniques around how can they get through these challenging times. So that's what we're doing these for. So welcome, and just a quick bit of ground rules, which I think were up there by mistake a minute ago. So this is about a 30-minute session, and we're going to lead the content. There's going to be lots of opportunity to interact with polls, whiteboard, and chat. You can use live chat at any point to communicate and ask any questions. We will also be using the live chat as part of the interaction. Your microphone will be on mute during the session, just simply to restrict background noise so we don't have any dogs or children or anything joining the session. Good tip is to make sure your power cable's connected. We have had a couple of people drop off because their devices run out of power. You might want a pen and note paper if there's any tips you want to take down. But a recording of this will be available on our website over the next few days for any of your colleagues who couldn't make it today. I'm sure you're getting very adept at using some of these tools now, like ourselves, but just for those of you that maybe haven't used Zoom before, we'll automatically mute your sound. It's your choice whether you want the camera on or off. Some people are on and some people are off, that's fine. Use the chat as I've talked about, and you may be asked to do that at certain points of the webinar. And I may ask you to participate in a poll, which will pop up on your screen to complete. When that does, if you just make sure you click submit when you've finished. And you will find that there is a ribbon if you move your cursor around if you're on a computer, or obviously finger if you're on a iPad or iPhone. There is a ribbon which has the ability to access things like the chat and to turn your microphone and video on and off, or certainly your video. Okay, so I hope that's all clear. So just in terms of myself, I've been with the AND Partnership since the very beginning, so I'm one of the founding directors, which makes me sound about 104. But in terms of myself, it's always a surprise to me when I do these slides, because Lee is in the background as my technical support, and he always puts a different phrase about me. So he says I'm a proud granddad using Zoom to stay in touch, which is absolutely true. 4 grandchildren from 2 grown-up children. We had a Zoom Mother's Day lunch the other day, which was quite a novelty, where we all kind of saw each other while we were eating. So it was very nice. But one of my passions is helping people to be at their best more of the time, which is one of the reasons why we set the AND Partnership up. And this webinar today is part of the Being at Your Best section. And what we know about the times that we're in at the moment, and indeed any changing, uncertain or anxious times, is it can take us away from being at our best self. And anything we can do that helps us get back into that place is going to make us perform better, feel better, and take care of our mental health and well-being. So really that's what we're going to be looking at today, is particularly when you're trying to lead teams remotely, what are the different skills and things you need to do to make that as effective as you can do. So the first thing we'd like to do is just a very quick poll with you. Assuming that you're all on here because you are either leading teams remotely or you are responsible for people who do lead teams remotely, what's the area that you're most uncertain about at the moment regarding leading remotely? So we've got down there formal communication, informal communication, motivation and engagement, mental health and well-being, goal setting, performance management. Or if there's another one that you're most concerned about, click that one, but send it through on the chat if there's another one that springs to mind. We'll try and make sure that we cover the most popular ones today. Okay, so it looks like that motivation and engagement is the most important, mental health and well-being being second. Yeah, so we will touch on those and the other couple that you've mentioned there as we go through the session today. So thank you for that. So before we get on to looking at what we could do about leading remotely, what do we need to do differently? I thought it would just be useful for you as employees yourselves or people who are experiencing remote working, just to think about what are the areas that you find most difficult or you're finding most difficult with working remotely. So I'm going to ask Lee if he will pull up the whiteboard while we're doing this and take the poll down. We do know this takes a little bit of time to click between the slides on the whiteboard, so I'm sure it will come up in a second. So I don't know how many of you, obviously we can't interact like we would be able to do in a session that we would be running normally, but some people work from home remotely a lot of the time already. For some people it's the first time they've had to do it, particularly day in, day out. So if you can think about what are the issues you're finding with working remotely, the particular concerns or things you're finding difficult, and just ping those through on the chat to me. And then once the whiteboard comes up, we'll start filling some of those in terms of how we can work on some of these. So I know personally, one of the biggest things I've found in working remotely is isolation. Any of you that have done Myers-Briggs, you'll be aware of the extroversion, introversion, and being an extrovert, I get energy from other people and from talking to others and being around others. So for me personally, the isolation is a particular one that I need to look out for. Another one is keeping in touch with people. And you have to do it very differently, as we'll come on to in a second. It's quite easy just to sit here thinking, who's out there? How do I actually get in contact with them? So that's another one for me. Keeping work and home boundaries is a particular difficult one. And I think we'll talk about how you might do that as we go through. I think for me, there's also adapting to new routines. There's less variety now when you're working from home, potentially, than you're used to. And therefore, you can have boredom creeping in because the routines can seem very similar. And my final one is adapting to new technology, which you may not have had to use before. So we're getting some coming through on the chat now, so I'll just read some of these out for you. So there's kind of juggling childcare, which I know a lot of people are experiencing, particularly with people as well with school-age children who are having to homeschool when they may never have done before. Staying motivated, so keeping that sort of level of motivation up. And then there's a kind of, being on the phone all day. I know it's an incredibly different type of tiredness at the end of the day when you've been staring at a screen. Staying focused. So keeping that the same level of focus that you can have when you're in an office and when you've got other people to help you. Another one about childcare and but two people working from home. That's an interesting one. Yeah. So when you and your partner or family member is working from home as well, not many of us have got two workstations. So who sits at the kitchen table and who gets the workstation is quite an interesting one, I'm sure. Yeah, we talked about missing interaction, which was in with the isolation. Learning digital skills. Yeah, missing the water cooler coffee machine conversations. That's a really good one. Not bumping into people spontaneously. You have to have planned spontaneity, which is always a challenge. Feeling guilty. Yeah, very interesting. Okay, so again, this is really ingrained in some of us about working from home means I'm not working as hard. And how do we actually get rid of that feeling of guilt? We talked about homework boundaries, interruptions, another good one. And eating too many biscuits. I like that. Yes, indeed. I'd completely gone off biscuits, and now I'm starting to have one with every cup of coffee. Goodness knows why I have a biscuit now and didn't have a work. But and news and work news overload, information overload. One of the things which is certainly becoming very true in terms of mental health and well-being is the need to limit the amount of information we're taking in. And I think there is only one topic of news, which is the first time in my lifetime I've seen this, and it's very interesting the effect it has on you. You can be having a really good day, and then you watch the news, and you suddenly feel anxious again. So my wife and I have limited ourselves to watching one news bulletin a day, and that tends to be the 6 o'clock news, not the 10 o'clock. Otherwise, we were going to bed and talking about it before we go to sleep. So and we're finding that's helping. So these are some of the things that we're finding difficulty in working remotely. So it's a fair assumption that our people will be feeling these similar things, and probably a lot more besides. So what we thought we'd do is just take you through some of the ideas. If we can move back to the slides again, Lee. I need to share them with you. I do remember that from last time. Okay, so we're just going to go through things to consider when working remotely. So feel free to, if any of these are useful that you haven't thought of, I'm sure you've thought of some of them already, but feel free to obviously use these with yourselves and your teams. These are just things from our experience and from talking to a lot of people about this. So we've split it into 4 categories. The first one is setup. Now, again, most people are already set up, but it would be worth checking that these things have been considered by people. Do they have an appropriate environment to work from? I've certainly seen some people sitting with laptops on their knee in bed, or sitting in the living room, and it's just like, are they giving themselves some space to actually work effectively, and have they got the right equipment set up in the right way? Because I do think if we are around doing this for another couple of months, people are going to start having repetitive strain injuries or neck problems if they haven't got the same PC set up in the same way that they had at work. So it's worth checking that as a leader and get. Could you try again? Sorry, my Siri's just suddenly started talking to me. Allowing flexibility. Put my phone out of reach. Allowing flexibility in working patterns. Recognizing issues with homeschooling and childcare. So this is a case of allowing for people having flexibility in their working life. Some people will like to actually work in the evenings if they're doing homeschooling or childcare during the day. Establishing homework boundaries and encouraging them to do the same can be very, very important. So, there's some simple little things you can do to establish those homework boundaries, like working in a separate part of the house, like somebody said to me the other day that they're actually going out the front door and coming back in the back door just to feel like they're going to work. But it's something about those boundaries. And be clear about new expectations with your team, when to be connecting and when they can and can't call you for advice. Again, very, very important, so they know what the boundaries are. Second is communication. That's one to take a look at, because you do have to communicate very differently when working remotely and leading remotely. Keep in touch more often. You can't over communicate when you're leading remotely. So having more one-to-ones, more whole team sessions, very, very important in times like this. The use of language is vital. So you might need to think about the language you're using, because the number of senses are reduced when you're communicating in this way. Using caring language, being inclusive, using we and us, and asking more questions of people can be very, very important to make them feel connected. If you've got any team ground rules, you might want to redo them, or recreate or create them from scratch if you haven't got them. How are you going to operate as a team during these times? And just get a set of ground rules set up. A good tip on meetings is reduce numbers and have critical people only, because the numbers that you have on meetings, on conference calls, I'm sure most of you have experienced massive conference calls. If you have those on video calls, it makes it very difficult to have anything like an interaction. The other tip we've been given just recently is, if you're having Zoom meetings, don't start them on the hour, start them at 2:15 or 1/4 the hour. They've got more chance of actually not falling over in terms of technology. And you have to work harder to check engagement. So use the technology such as breakout rooms on Zoom to encourage private discussion and thinking through questions. It's important that people have time and space to talk to others about things you're proposing or what's going on in the business so that they can think through the questions they've got to ask you. The third section, one more down the bottom, keep in touch with those that you have furloughed. Again, if any of you are in that furloughing situation, these people are going to come back to you and need to be up to speed when they come back. Otherwise, you'll have a period of readjustment. So do keep in touch with those people if anybody's been furloughed. Third category is around the tools and technology side. And use Zoom or equivalent so that you can still see each other. Very, very important to get that face-to-face contact rather than just hearing voices on conference calls. And if your company system doesn't support that, again, people, you can't force them to, but we've had a lot of people moving to their private equipment and private Wi-Fi so that you can keep in touch by this way. But most companies are now moving to either Skype or Zoom or one of those face-to-face technologies. Make sure you've got rules for video team meetings. A check-in at the beginning is always really helpful. Just nothing else other than how are you feeling today? And you will have people who are in different places. That's absolutely fine, up and down. That's the way that it goes. So make sure that somebody is facilitating and pulling it all together. What we do when you've got more than about 6 to 8 people is we get people to put their hand up in the background so that you know they want to speak. Otherwise, it can become a bit of a free-for-all. Muting when not speaking to avoid background noise can be very useful, and using things like the chat to speak to each other one-on-one rather than everyone talking over each other. So make sure these rules are known by everyone to make sure that it's effective. Ooh. I think trigger happy. Use all the tools available to make team interactions as engaging as possible. So we've got this on Zoom, you've got the whiteboard feature, you've got breakout rooms, you've got live chat, you've got polls. So try and make sure you use all of those to really make an engaging meeting when you have them. What a lot of people have told us they've done is set up a WhatsApp group for frequent contact. So just keeping in touch with the odd text message just makes people feel potentially less isolated. And it's really important that you maintain the fun. So people have got lots of ideas around this. So virtual lunch, virtual coffee together, virtual water cooler, coffee machine invites. So don't just stick to the invites for the business meetings. You know, some people are having Friday fizz sessions at 3 o'clock on a Friday where people can actually get together and just have either an actual or a metaphorical glass of fizz or a cup of coffee together before the weekends, or a Monday morning check-in with each other. But, you know, finding something where you're not just talking about work, I think is really important in these times. And if you've got any other tools or technologies that you want to share with the others on the call, do send them through on the live chat. Anything that you're finding helpful, either in the tools or technology, or indeed on anything that you're finding useful on the ways of working, please ping them through and I'll cover those off at the end. And the finally is around leadership style. And this is an opportunity to practice empowerment, trust, and letting go, and moving away from micromanagement or busy manager. So use this opportunity. Some of the leadership work we do is around moving from busy manager to purposeful leader. And this is a real opportunity to practice that, even though it might be very hard to stay purposeful at these times. So trusting people is essential. If you're on their shoulder all the time, checking in with them all the time, they're going to start feeling a lack of trust and even more anxious. Try and be really focused when you're on a video call with the team. One way I find that being very helpful is to clear the desk, and despite what's happened in the start of the call, put your phone away. It was on silent, but things like Siri talking to you can actually distract the team. So yeah, so clear the desk so that you don't get distracted, your eyes don't keep moving away from who you're talking to. Consider how you praise and encourage, because this comes naturally when you're seeing people around and talking to them about work in an office. Doesn't come so naturally when you've got to actually dial into them to actually praise or encourage them. So think about how that's going to be authentic and done on a regular basis. This is a big one for a lot of people. Don't make assumptions. So when you see somebody either dressed inappropriately or in their PJs, or not able to get hold of someone because you immediately think they're not working, it doesn't necessarily mean that. You've got to move more to measuring outputs, not inputs, when you're leading remotely. So is the work still getting done? That's the real acid test. Watch out for signs of poor mental health and well-being. Watch out for people who are changing their behavior on the calls, getting more agitated, more anxious, perhaps going quieter, and find something that actually can help them with that. One of the things that we're getting a lot of sign-ups for at the moment is we've got a half-day mental health awareness program that people can come on as leaders or indeed as individuals. And there's a lot of those out there, but try and get some help for people if their well-being seems to be suffering, because people are going to need some support during this time. Give team sessions on how to work productively from home. So don't assume it's obvious. Do some very quick webinars like this, or some very quick sessions to help people get set up and feel as if they are working productively. Don't assume that they will just naturally do it. And consider having a coach to help you with new skills or ways of working. People are finding this really helpful to do some virtual coaching with people on how they could need to change their particular style or methods of working. So the only plug of this session really is that those bottom two, if you want any help with those, we have got sessions. We can do both team sessions and online coaching. So those are the kind of things that we have thought of. And just going back to what people are saying, so some ideas about what else you could do. So one idea is we had a games night over the House Party app. So using some of these apps that are springing up to join people together, but using them for work colleagues, I think is a really good idea. Recognizing birthdays and a quick sing-song over Zoom makes people feel included and special. Yeah, and balancing the needs of extroverts and introverts in the ground rules. So yeah, making sure that it's not just the talkative people that actually get the airtime, so to speak. So some really good ideas, nice ideas over there. So in terms of the toolbox tips, this is just like a summary really to sort of think about. More contact is needed, not less. Make sure that you're thinking about, how do I have more contact with my people, one-to-one and together. Ensure the environment and the equipment are right. Use all tools available to you to communicate. Measure outcomes rather than judging inputs. Adapt your leadership style if necessary. Pay attention to mental health and well-being, and don't forget to have some fun, because people are going to need it more than ever when they're working remotely for a long time. Okay, so we've talked about, if you've got any questions, please ping them through on the chat, and we'll either answer them now or straight after the session if we haven't got time to answer them now. So this is just a little bit about other online offerings that we have, if anybody's interested. I'll go through a schedule in a minute of there's more free webinars if you found this useful. They are this sort of duration, and they're really just about giving people tips and techniques and joining people together to start sharing ideas. We also do one-to-one online coaching, as I said before. We've got something called the Wheel of Wellbeing, which we do online, which helps people to analyze which area of their life they might need to focus on to actually help their well-being. And linked to that, a mental health aware half day online. If anyone's interested, that's also available. And we do client-specific online webinars and digital workshops. So a lot of clients have moved their offering over onto online, and it can work really effectively in Zoom. You can still have paired and trio conversations in the breakout rooms, etc. So it does work very well. So the schedule of webinars that we've talked about are on the website, but if anybody's interested, here's the list of webinars that are coming up. So please do join us for any others that you are interested in. So I've got a lot of topics that will help you. It's split into 3 sections: being at my best during these difficult times, personal development if you've got more time to think about your own personal development, and research and planning if you're thinking about the future. So that's really where we're coming to. We're coming to the end of the session. So please try, if you want to, follow us on LinkedIn. We'll actually keep in touch that way and be able to see, you'll be able to see what's going on and the new events, the new webinars that we're coming out with. If you're interested in finding out how we've helped other organizations, there's some case studies on our website. And if you want a conversation about anything we've talked about today, or indeed anything else about the change that's going on at the moment, please do get in touch with us. We'd love to have a chat with you. There's a phone number and an email in the bottom corner. So just a final thing which would be very useful, I'll leave this on the screen. We'd really appreciate your feedback on the webinar. So if you just open your camera on your phone and scan the QR code that's on there, you should get a questionnaire popping up as if by magic. So it's only about 4 or 5 questions. We'd really appreciate feedback so that we can make all the webinars as useful as possible. If there are any topics which aren't on the webinar list that you'd like to see, please ping those through to us either on the chat now or by email. Just let us know and we'll tell you if we can include those. We'll certainly do our best to do that. Okay, so just in summary, really the most important thing about leading remotely is that we can't now rely on all of our senses, so we have to work harder to see what's really going on for people. But it's really about using all your best leadership skills and amending them to fit the situation. There aren't that many new ones, you've just got to use them differently. So we hope to have you on more topics in the future. So thank you very much for joining us. Hope you found it useful, and thanks for joining in on live chat to make this as useful as we can. So take care, stay safe, and we'll hope to see you on another webinar soon. Thanks very much.